Welcome to the Science and Spirituality Podcast, where we dive deep into universal spiritual principles and ground them in modern science. My name is Chris Carden.
And my name is Kevin Carden. And we are committed to simplifying the spiritual side of success for you with easy to understand scientific research so you could walk away with practical tools to create radical transformations in your life. Let's get started. Power of visualization. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic because on our podcast, we have covered the power of vision before. It was one of our earliest episodes. I think it was episode 5. And people really enjoyed it. And now I wanted to come back to this whole topic because not only having a vision, having a clear image of what you want to create is important, but also visualizing it and picturing that in your mind consistently and regularly is really powerful. And so we're going to dive into why and some tips on how we can use this practice in our life to change our life. So let's get into it.
Yeah. And so I think a good place to start is I don't think that everyone realizes that they're always using the power of visualization, whether unconsciously or what we're going to talk more about on this podcast is consciously. Mm-hmm. Now, our brains like to create like stories and patterns around what we see and what we experience. And that helps us like put us on a trajectory of where we want to go in our life. And so most people, like, they don't even have like the lamp turned on about their awareness about this. But like we know from like laser, right? Like a laser beam is basically just focused light. So first you need to have like the general idea of like what you want. You have to have the light turned on of awareness, and then you can start to like more and more laser focus it so that it becomes like a better practice. So I think it's cool because me and you are both on different levels with this when it comes to visualization, because I feel like I'm in the stage where the light's turned on, but I'm not focusing the light into like a laser specific thing to really start to use the power of it. So so I think we're going to get a good perspective on this podcast for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And the place I want to begin with that, it's like you were using the analogy of light, and that you have to have the light turned on, which is you have to have an image of what you want to create and start to focus on it. And then where you make it a laser, where it's a pinpointed focus, is what I really wanted to talk about and what I've really been practicing almost daily for the past 6 to 8 months, is a practice of visualization where I'm literally taking time out of my day to close my eyes and imagine my dream and imagine the vision I want to create for my life. But before I dive into that, and I'll share some tips on like what has worked for me, I want to just really come back to the point of what you were sharing, that everyone visualizes, like whether we know it or not. And because we're image making beings, like literally the words that we're speaking bring up images on our mind. And I'm thinking about a teaching point that Bob Proctor had on one of the audios that I have in the programs that I teach for my or guide my clients through. And one of the things that Bob Proctor talks about is how we create images. And again, we all do it all the time. And what happens is like our words or even our thoughts, they bring images to mind because thoughts our neurons have specific like holographic images that they have that's like imbued in those neurons. So when we think a thought or we see something in our environment or say something, let's say like a word, like I say car or front door, you don't see the letters DOOR or the letters SINK, or I always use the analogy sink, but I said car, I didn't say sink. Or you don't see the letters. Yeah, I know, right? You don't see the letters CAR. You see your car, or the car you think of most often, or your front door. And so what happens is when we say that word or think that thought, the neuron that has that impression of the image lights up. And so the image flashes across the screen of our mind. And so we visualize all the time, but we don't often consciously use this to vision what we want to create. We often just, think from or vision from the patterns of our past. And we've talked about that. I'd encourage anyone to, if you're really like thinking about this and like, I want to, create more of a vision that's in alignment with what I want to create, go back to the episode on the power of vision, because we talk about getting a crystal clear image. But again, so for this episode, we're going to talk about, okay, the practice of visualization and the power of it. So
yeah, it's almost as if we created language to describe the visions we were having in our head, but our primary way of speaking, at least to ourselves and relating to the world, is through images and pictures.
yeah,
Yeah, so like basically, I feel like with visualization, with having a vision first and writing it down, you're almost working backwards. So you're writing your words to write the vision down, but then you're using that to project images in your head.
exactly.
And I think the cool thing about the neuron thing that you brought up too is that when that neuron fires about that holographic image of a car, it also, there's all these other neurons that are going to be associated with it.
Yep.
Like you could have got into a car accident when you were little, and that brings up images of car accident, right? And so the whole point about visualization is you're adding new associations into your neurons, so that when you walk through life on a day-to-day, like moment by moment basis, you start to see things differently because you're creating new associations between your neurons by using the power of vision.
Yes.
To literally restructure the way that your brain works and the way that your brain sees things. And so to the point at the beginning of the podcast, most people, that's just happening unconsciously. Like all the way up until this point, like you're just an amalgamation of all of your experiences and everything that you've seen, done, and how you've reacted to it in the past. And so without any conscious tinkering of that, you're just going to continue acting in the same exact way until some crazy thing comes into your experience that totally knocks you off course, which is what happens to most people.
Yep.
But you can look under the hood and start to change that and be like, what do I want to start seeing in my life? And what do I want to start experiencing? And then like almost programming it that way.
Not almost. It absolutely is programming it. Yeah. And so you start to see that experience for yourself.
Yeah. And so I was saying, like, before we started this podcast, that I feel like I'm in like the stage where the light's on, but it's not focused yet, because when I switched over to studying acupuncture, like more things that I do in my life now are related towards acupuncture because I really love what I want to do. And I have this idea of what I want to do in the future. And so like my brain kind of like starts to see things like, oh, that book I just saw on Amazon will like help me in this area that I want to get good at. Whereas like I would have never noticed that book before because my brain wasn't creating those associations and creating those images.
Yeah, exactly. What you're describing is something I want to read out of this book that I'm studying. It's called Your Invisible Power by Genevieve Barrand. I'll put all that in the description of this podcast. So if anyone wants to get it, highly recommend it. And in the first chapter, first chapter is titled Order of Visualization. And I want to read the paragraph because what you're talking about, Chris, is exactly what happens when you start to visualize. And you're at the beginning stage of just dreaming and actually seeing what you want rather than taking that time like every single day to really work on it. But still, it's working to some degree in this way of ordering your mind. So she says, the exercise of the visualizing faculty keeps your mind in order and attracts to you the things you need to make life more enjoyable in an orderly way.
Mm-hmm.
If you train yourself in the practice of deliberately picturing your desire and carefully examining your picture, you will soon find that your thoughts and desires proceed in a more orderly procession than ever before. And I'm going to come back to that because I want to share my practice of it. Like I said, I've really been developing this practice of imaging what I want on a daily basis. But she continues, having reached a state of ordered mentality, you are no longer in a constant state of mental hurry. Hurry is fear and consequently destructive. In other words, when your understanding grasps the power to visualize your heart's desire and hold it with your will, it attracts to you all things requisite to the fulfillment of that picture by the harmonious vibrations of the law of attraction. And the last sentence I want to read here is so powerful, is that you realize that since order is heaven's first law and visualization places things in their natural order, then it must be a heavenly thing to visualize. I mean, there's so much into this with that.
I mean, the first thing that I thought of when you read that, well, I thought of a couple of things. The order thing, right? That order. And it's about, like, we talked about this on our podcast, like before, about how like the brain, like it wants to create patterns. It looks for patterns. It wants to have order.
Yeah.
So it's going to create some kind of order based on your previous experiences if you don't give it that new order to go about.
Yep.
And when your brain creates order unconsciously, it feels like you're not in order because you're not the one consciously directing it, but your brain's trying.
Yep.
And then the second thing I thought of is just relating it to Chinese medicine. Like about how the universe and heaven's about balance. Like that's what TCM is about. And I think that's what medicine should be about too, is like there's an order to things, and all you have to do is tweak things and help things get back into order, and then kind of let the intelligence do its thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think of the organization of this entire universe, let alone our bodies, like what you're talking about with traditional Chinese medicine, is that our bodies are intelligent and know the perfect way to operate so that we feel most alive, and that our health is vibrant and growing and thriving. But also just like in the entire universe, like think about it, our galaxy is spinning in just this perfect spiral. Our our planet is balanced in a certain way that literally we can have life, like just the certain balance of oxygen in the air, the atmosphere around our planet, that like the ozone layer, to keep all that in place so that we can have life along with the rest of the animals and the plants and everything. So there's such precision to the order of the universe. And so when we visualize, we're placing our order. Like I think of that, like it's like you're placing an order like to the universe, like I want this, but it's also you're organizing, like you're putting order to your life and what you want. And so I mentioned I come back to like my practice with it. Like I've known about this practice of visualization for 6 years, ever since I started studying with my mentor, Mary Morrissey, back in 2014. And I'd done this, like practicing this visualization practice and closing my eyes and visualizing, like here and there, but never on a consistent basis until the last 6 to 8 months or so. And it's been extremely powerful. I'm just so much more organized. I noticed that the time that I spend in worrying about like what's going to happen in my business or what's going to happen in my life or my money, it's just that amount of time that I worry is way, way less. I'm more powerful in terms of controlling my thoughts. And I just honestly just feel better. And so one tip I'd suggest, because it's when I first started trying to visualize, like I felt like I was just so everywhere with it. Like my mind wasn't focused. And even when I tried to visualize, like my mind actually went towards like what I didn't want. But so one thing I'd recommend is to start writing out what you want in the present tense. I coach my clients in doing this and writing out a vision statement so that you have it as an energetic blueprint and you can read it. So what has really helped me in my visualizing practice is I take time, like this morning I did this as well, is that I take time to open up my vision that I've written down and literally read what I have written so that I can then close my eyes and visualize what I have just read. So it's not like I'm just trying to come up with things in my mind. It's something that is just structured. So personally for me, that has played a big part in helping me visualize.
I think the cool part about doing that too is like you'll notice the power of it right away when after you read that and then you sit and visualize. Like if you're aware and you're aware of the sensations in your body, like viscerally, like you'll feel a difference.
Yeah.
Like your body will respond to those new messages because you're giving it a new like blueprint.
Yeah.
To release chemicals and hormones and towards that thing rather than something else from the past. So you're like, yeah, it's if you're very aware, you'll notice that.
Yeah. And that's, dude, that there's a scientific experiment. I mean, tons of scientific experiments that are done that prove that our mind cannot tell the difference between something vividly imagined or visualized and something in our physical reality. Like one example, a very simple example I think of is they took two basketball players, I think they were professional, and had one visualize them shooting, I think like 100 free throws and getting it in every single time. And then they had someone else, like, a pro basketball player, actually shoot those 100 free throws. And when they measured their brainwave activity, they literally could not tell the difference. It was the exact same parts of the brain lighting up, from actually physically shooting the basketball and getting the, like shooting the basketball and actually getting it in the hoop, than visualizing it. And in fact, it actually turned out better for the person who visualized. Like that person who visualized and getting that shot in every single time actually did better when they actually got on the court and did it physically. So it's crazy.
It's like a perfect example of like thoughts becoming things.
Yeah.
Because like the guy that was shooting it just imaginarily in his head, he was mobilizing like neurotransmitters and peptides in his body as if he was actually shooting those free throws.
Exactly.
So like thought comes first and then it mobilizes energy and matter. So it's almost like you're doing the thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think, I mean, that's all I have to say about this. I want to make this short so that, again, that people can get this and go with it and actually do this. So if you're listening, I challenge you to even just take the next 7 days, challenge yourself for just 1 week and sit down and visualize even for just a minute. I challenge for 5 minutes. I usually visualize about 10 minutes per day, but start somewhere, start small so that you can at least just work on this and practice it. It's something you have to develop over time. And if y'all need help, reach out to me or Chris. Like, we'll help you and just staying consistent, like at the very least, just, you know, encouraging you. But I do this for a living. Like, I help my clients in staying consistent with this. So if you know that the power of this and you really would love this to be something consistent in your life, then shoot me a message. Let's have a conversation, see if what I do and what you need could be a good fit. So on Instagram at Kevin F. Carton. So yeah.
Put that to the episode.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do that. Awesome. Anything else you want to add, Chris?
No, I think that was good. And then you rewind like 5 minutes to hear the advice you gave about. Yeah. If you want like, concrete advice, because that was really good.
Awesome. Yeah. And final thing I want to say is just be compassionate with yourself, like as you work on this, because our mind has such deep patterns and well-worn paths of what we think and what we do. And so if you find yourself being resistant to visualizing, even though you know the power of this, just be compassionate and make it okay. And that's like, not beat yourself up for not doing it or like distracting yourself, because the more you beat yourself up, the less willing you're going to be to stay consistent with it. So
yeah. And then two episodes that we did recently that can help too is the one about being a beginner.
Yeah.
The one about like habits and patterns, like how little things over time. Yeah. So if you want to listen to those 2 episodes in conjunction with this, that'll help you out if you're really committed to starting a practice like this.
Yeah, for sure. Those are great recommendations. Yeah. So with that said, get to it. We'll talk with you in another episode. And that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in. And we really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. So any questions, any comments, just connect with us on Instagram. You could always DM us at Kevin Francis Carton
and at Chris J. Carton. And also, if you feel guided to, the one thing we do ask is for you to please rate the podcast and leave us a review. This way we can reach more people and impact more lives with this amazing information. With that, we'll see you on the next episode.